Hello there and welcome back to another review. Today we're going to be having a look at the ultimate classic kung fu comedy horror film that is Mr. Vampire, one of my all-time favourites. Absolutely love this movie. If you've never seen it, please go check it out. If you're a fan of sort of spooky encounters by Sammo, you'll absolutely love this. You will lap this film up. Made back in 1985, directed by Ricky Lau. This was a film that I actually had back on VHS back in the day from the Made in Hong Kong label, produced by Sammo. It was a film that, to say, was a huge success. I mean, it spawned numerous sequels, made famous the idea of hopping vampires. I would say it was a film. I remember it being on TV as well back in the day. I think it's one of them films that you can really say is a perfect example of just Hong Kong movie making. It really is a prime example of why, if somebody says to you, like to me, like why do you like Hong Kong movies? Why do you like old school like kung fu movies and that? You know, you'd say, well, watch something like Mr. Vampire. You'll see why I love it so much, because a lot of people, a lot of Western audiences loved Mr. Vampire. It would be great at some point if, like a Eureka or 88 Films, I know they've released Mr. Vampire, but it would be great at some point if they also released all the sequels and the spin-offs. Lam Ching-ying, I mean, I'd go so far as to say it's probably his most famous role, isn't it? I mean, isn't this the role I think we can all agree that he's most associated with, sort of the vampire hunter type role? Best known, he'd done it in all the sequels and even similar movies such as Magic Cop and Vampire versus Vampire, even Spooky Encounters 2 with Sammo. I say directed by Ricky Lau. Alongside Lam Ching-ying here we get Ricky Hui, Siu-ho, Moon Lee, who was very much sort of unknown at the time. This was very much sort of early Moon Lee vehicle. I remember she was also in Jackie Chan's, like the Chinese version of The Protector, but this was very early on sort of in Moon Lee's career. But just so getting into Mr. Vampire today, what makes it so classic and what makes it just such an amazing film? Obviously Sammo had worked with Lam Ching-ying numerous times, but I think it was, give or take, mainly his role, Lam Ching-ying's role in The Prodigal Son, that sort of secured him the role here within Mr. Vampire. Apparently Sammo wanted like a very relaxed atmosphere when making this movie, being sort of the producer. The only trouble is with Sammo being who he is and his reputation and just his impact on the industry, whenever he come to visit the set and he was hanging around with the actors or the cast and crew, he would make everybody nervous. He would make like the director and everybody nervous. So he tried to do sort of a hands-off approach, very much the same way, if you imagine sort of how Rick Rubin, the producer, is known to do so, like sort of not necessarily there all the time. So I think the idea was he'd done it sort of hands off. He was still supervising the production, but he wasn't there necessarily as much as he should have been or could have been, because I think he very much entrusted Ricky Lau to make a good job of this film. A lot of people actually even go so far as to think Sammo even directed this one. Obviously, Sammo being no stranger to kung fu and horror, like say films like Encounter of the Spooky Kind or Dead and the Deadly. A lot of people think this was very much because Sammo's name is attached to it. They think, ergo, he directed it. It's not the case. He did only produce this one. The film mixes horror. You got kung fu, you got comedy, you got Chinese folklore, you got slapstick, all into one amazing package, expanding on source, as I say, of what sort of Sammo was sort of doing before with Spooky Encounters. But it's one of these films that I remember it being on the TV ages ago on Channel 4, back when they used to show here in the UK like sort of kung fu and horror movies, movies from other countries and things like that. And I know at one point they put Dead and the Deadly on as well. But as Western audiences, straight away it was a big hit. People loved Mr. Vampire and just like what was involved, and like I say, the comedy, the kung fu, and just everything in it. It's just a good fun. It's a good ride. It's a really classic film, and it'd be great if at some point in the future we got like a Mr. Vampire box set going on, or like a Lam Ching-ying horror box set or something like that. It would be wonderful to see. So we start with Siu-ho playing like a prank on Man Choi, played by Ricky Hui, pretending he is like a vampire. Lam Ching-ying plays their sort of Sifu, and they're sort of like his bumbling assistants. You always get the skilled master who is just dealt with these bumbling assistants who don't, it's not that they're sort of not skilled or anything like that, but at the same time they just make errors all the time. They get things wrong. They're a bit wet behind the ears in a lot of things. Although you could argue, like I say, Man Choi, played by Ricky Hoy, is a lot more bumbling than Chin Siu-ho here. Lam plays the part perfectly, playing it very straight, heavy-handed, even rude at some times, but at the same time having these great comic undertones that only like sort of Lam Ching-ying could deliver. Even the opening scene where he doesn't want to make a fool of himself by having Western tea when he goes to see Master Yam, so he takes Man Choi along to sort of make the mistakes for him. Like, he's a very proud man. It's not to say he's not talented and he's not skilled in like Taoism and what he does in magic and things like that, but he doesn't want to be made to look a fool. Like, he's got a reputation to uphold, and that's what's so funny about this character here. Like, he does have faults, but he goes out of his way to even, like I say, send his students up the river if he thinks he's going to be embarrassed. Lets them make the mistakes for him. Moonlee plays Master Yam's daughter and wants to, like, basically Master Yam wants to discuss the reburial of his father's coffin. There's even a funny scene where, like, Moonlee's showing them how to drink the wrong way. Like, she's showing them how to enjoy tea, like the Western, like, they're going to Western tea, they're not used to it, ordering things like coffee, they're not sure how to drink it. Lam Ching-ying at one point ordering a black coffee, he's never even had black coffee before. So she shows them sort of how to eat what they've got and drink what they've got on their table in the wrong way, knowing damn well that they haven't got a clue what they're doing, just to embarrass them even more, which, you know, is quite fun. It's fun to see. Chin Siu-ho works in his auntie's shop and is told, like, the next woman that comes in at one point is a prostitute, which he mistakenly takes as Moonlee. So there's little comedy, little scenes as the film sort of progresses and builds up, but the main focus of the point is the Master Yam and wanting his father to have a reburial. So they raise the coffin, and I love this scene. If you watch it, you have like this creepy music and the birds flying away sort of when they open the coffin. There's a real sense of atmosphere here, like there's a real eerie sense of what's going on. This scene obviously being shot in the New Territories. They take it to the mortuary to sort of plan what to do. Man Choi and Chin Siu-ho burn incense on graves before they leave, after having raised the coffin. Chin Siu-ho hears like this female voice. Man Choi discovers that 2 joss sticks have burned different ways, which means somebody will die. So they're getting an eerie feeling like something's going on, something's not quite right. Back at the mortuary, they realise that the corpse hasn't rotted. Master Yam's father, he has not rotted at all. Like, by now, he should be rotting, but he's in quite good condition. So, as I say, the whole film is this guy, this corpse that is turned gradually and slowly but surely turning into a vampire. So Lam starts to use like his Taoist skills to deal with the problem, cutting a chicken for real, much like in Spooky Encounters, if you recall, when Peter Chan actually cuts the head off of a real live chicken. It's the same here. They do actually use a real chicken. They do actually cut a real chicken. So if you don't, if you find things like that bit, nasty to watch, then I don't blame you. It is a little bit, but just if you've never seen this, just letting you know, there is a real chicken that is used. So, yeah, as I say, but much like in Spooky Encounters, where it's the same thing happens. And basically what Lam Ching-ying is trying to do with this chicken blood is trying to create this thing that creates this special inks that they can use to they put on this string that you can use to sort of pluck around the coffin. The only trouble is, like I mentioned before, where they are sort of bumbling assistants, they do forget to sort of pluck underneath, because they want to create like this sort of, it's got to go all round the coffin. But Man Choi and Chin Siu-ho, they forget to sort of do it underneath. So straight away, it's not going to be good. With this film, I will say, while I think about it, the pacing as well is something that's really good. Ricky Lau gets the pacing just right. The film flows at a really good pace. It is just weird, polished comedy horror with a great cast, great pacing, moments of kung fu, and it just all works. It really does all work. So while riding his bike home one night, Chin Siu-ho, unaware he has like this female ghost who sits on the back of his bike. This is sort of a subplot in relation to sort of the main plot. I mean, the main plot is obviously this guy turning into a vampire, but the other side, the other second plot to that is we've got this female ghost that is sort of after Chin Siu-ho. Lam thinks at one point that he is something. We see sort of the hand of the corpse trying to poke its way out of the coffin. Moon Lee's cousin is like a police officer, and he's such a jerk, and he sort of has the hots for her, and you just hate this guy right away. You just can't stand. He's annoying. He's like just everything about not the the guy playing him, but just the character himself. This guy is just like despicable. So Ricky and Chin Siu-ho take one of his hairs, which Ricky swallows, so he can sort of control the guy's body, and he starts sort of slapping himself, taking his clothes off, so the other guy takes his clothes off in front of Moon Lee. And it's the kind of thing I imagine when it was played at the Chinese audiences, when it was released in like the Hong Kong theatres. I'd imagine the crowd would have been absolutely lapping this up. I'd imagine they would have found it absolutely beyond hysterical. So the coffin bursts open and the vampire kills Master Yam. They find the next morning what gets me is like they sort of had their suspicions that the body's going to, it's turning into a vampire anyway. Paranoid enough as that is, like they don't think to just keep an eye on it all night long, I suppose, because Lam Ching-ying thought the coffin was protected. He didn't feel he needed to, but kills Master Yam. They find the next morning, and sort of seeing that the kill was done by somebody with long fingernails, Lam gets arrested, but he knows where Master Yam has been killed. He's going to turn into a vampire too. Whilst in prison, he gets Man Choi to sort of protect Moon Lee and Chin Siu-ho to sort of bring him stuff, because he knows, like I said, at some point Master Yam is going to turn into one as well. He gets Chin Siu-ho to bring him his gear that he needs to sort of deal with the problem. Some funny scenes here, some really good stuff, and like I say, just the brilliant comedy and timing of Lam Ching-ying, like for example him getting his head stuck in the bars a couple of times, or when he says like to Chin Siu-ho he wanted him to bring rice, but Chin Siu-ho actually brings it actually cooked when all he wanted just was the normal grains of rice. It's little things like that that just keep the comedy flowing, keeping the comedy pace happening throughout the film. Just adds, like I say, just keeps everything ticking over. So Yam's body comes to life and is now a vampire. Chin Siu-ho puts like a talisman on his forehead to stop him moving. I love it when Wei as well, cousin of Moon Lee, I love it when Wei returns with his like assistants, and they do not bat an eyelid the fact that Master Yam's body is just standing up. Like he was laying down, he's dead. They do not bat an eyelid that this body is now standing up. They're like, right, just put him back. They're totally oblivious to the fact, hang on, wait a minute, why is the corpse standing up? Which just did tickle me. So the talisman comes off and all three decide to sort of hold their breath. And we have a funny scene here where you pan across from like Chin Siu-ho, Lam Ching-ying and the character of Wei. And they're all holding their breath in a different way. They're all holding their breath in a really different way, because apparently if you can't breathe, the vampire can't sort of detect where you are. And again, going back to that sort of the character Lam Ching-ying's playing, how proud he is and he can't be made to look a fool. He can't hold his breath much longer. He's about to give up, but he ends up sort of pinching the Wei character just so it's make sure it's him that breathes first, because he's got a lot of pride, right? He's got to the point he doesn't care what he has to do. He can't be made to look like the one who's caved in first. Worth noting as well with this film, with the kung fu and things like that, it's not so much like, say, one-on-one kung fu, or there's not necessarily a lot of kung fu as you would expect in sort of this guy versus this guy. What you get with this film is some set pieces. You get some fantastic set pieces, akin to sort of like a lot of horror films like Evil Dead, that kind of thing, where it is just in one sort of room, but it's just a lot of madness that's happening. It's not like quote unquote kung fu per se. There is some great flips and stuff here from Chin Siu-ho, but it's just mainly a set piece with like everything else that's going on. It's the slapstick, and like I say, that really does make it work. So when he pinches Wei, that just did tickle me. So they burn Master Yam, and the vampire comes to Yam's house. And if you watch this scene, this is a real eerie shot as well in this moment where you see Man Choi and Moon Lee are hiding in the closet in like sort of the cupboard area, and there's this really creepy scene. It's very like blink and you miss it, but the camera sort of slows down, and you just see the vampire hopping towards the closet in slow motion, and just that image of that is really creepy. If you watch the film or you've seen the movie and you know the bit I mean, there's something about that shot that I always found it very sort of eerie just in nature. They use like a bamboo pole so they can both take turns breathing. I love how Man Choi as well at this point gets lipstick around his mouth after sort of Moon Lee has used the bamboo pole. Ricky ends up getting injured by the vampire, and after Lam and Chin Siu-ho return, he is told to keep moving to avoid turning into a vampire, because he gets injured I think he gets like sort of fingernails, or he gets gripped, or something like goes into his skin at some point, but he gets injured by the vampire. And they're like, you've got to keep moving if you want to avoid turning in to a vampire. And so if you remember where, like, Sammo in Spooky Encounters has to collect like 50 chicken eggs, but the guy doesn't have 50 chicken eggs, so he puts some other eggs in as well. The same thing happens in this film in regards to rice. You got Wu-ma, and Chin Siu-ho wants glutinous rice, but Wu-ma gives him some glutinous rice, but also long grain rice as well. So you can never trust the sellers in these kung fu comedy horror movies. They're always, when you've got to protect yourself, like sort of from the undead, going from these rice and egg merchants in the street, they are just not to be trusted. Not to be trusted in the slightest, because they will always do you over. They will always somehow con you out of what you wanted. You just can't trust them. So the girl ghost appears again and pretends she's being assaulted to attract Chin Siu-ho. She takes him home and drugs him with some wine. Ricky wakes up with long nails and is on the turn. Y turns up to see his progress, and he dresses up as like a woman to cover up the fact that he is going pale and he is actually gradually turning into a vampire. Even at one point, it made me laugh, where even going so far as to sort of file his teeth down to sort of cover up the fact he is turning into a vampire. So after noticing marks on Chin Siu-ho's neck, Lam follows him to see what is happening and uses like some leaves to see the female ghost's true form. And this is where she gets like spiked hair and becomes like this floating head. It's the kind of thing that could sort of only really happen in Hong Kong movies, that crazy, wacky action that we come to expect, especially, I'd say, in the horror movies. It's funny when Lam as well, later on in the film, he's addressing both of them in the later scene. He's like, look at you both. He says, I've got one poisoned by a corpse and the other obsessed with a ghost. Like I say, he's got these two to always look after, and they just can't look after themselves, and they're both sitting there. One's actually, like I say, completely out of it, turning into a vampire. The other one's completely smitten with this ghost, and it's just a funny scene. So you do actually feel sorry for Man Choi at some points, as you really don't want him to change into a vampire, because he's like the most lovable character in the movie. You really do not want him to turn into a vampire. So it starts off comedy, but there is moments where you think, you don't want him to turn into one. Which it eventually does, because of, like I say, Tricky Wu-ma and his wife. And I love at one point even trying to file his teeth down. So the film ends with the vampire coming to the mortuary after Man Choi has sort of healed, and Lam, with the help of Anthony Chan, who plays another sort of Taoist priest, manages to defeat the vampire. And like with many Hong Kong films, the film just abruptly ends. It just really, like, once they've done all the action, once they've said what they got to say, the film just ends, and that's what's great about Hong Kong movies. Like, they're in, they're out, you get all your fun, all your comedy, all your kung fu, all your horror, done and dusted within like 90 minutes. And it's just it's just an amazing fun film. Like with the ghost, the ghost that's going after Chin Siu-ho, there's no really sort of payoff with that. She just sort of, when Lam sort of confronts her, she just sort of disappears. He doesn't sort of deal with her or kills her or sends her to heaven or anything like that, or sends her to, she just flies away, and that's the end of it. So there's not really sort of a resolve there, but like I mentioned, with a lot of Hong Kong movies, once they've done what they need to do, you get to that final action scene, the film just ends. And it's just, as I say, it is really, really good. And if you've only seen, like I say, sort of kung fu comedy horror, like say Spooky Encounters, or my advice, if you are new to kung fu movies, watch Spooky Encounters first and then go to Mr. Vampire, because you will definitely, there's definitely a lot of not similarities, but they're of the same type of genre, with, like I say, with kung fu and comedy and horror. But amazing film, absolutely amazing film. It would be great at some point to get all the other Mr. Vampires released here in the UK on Blu-ray. So Eureka, if you're listening, let's have like a Mr. Vampire box set, or get some of the other classic Lam Ching-ying horror movies that he did. But please go and check out Mr. Vampire, and it's just an absolutely phenomenal Hong Kong movie. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the review, and I'll see you again soon.